There's an old story in Hollywood that, for all I know, might even be true. James Cameron walks into the boardroom of 20th Century Fox, full of executives and full of all these big money guys, and pitches a follow-up to the now classic sci-fi film Alien. He writes Alien on a board, and then adds an S, and then turns the S into a $sign. He then continues to make one of the greatest sequels of all time, and Fox doesn't know what to do next.
In 1979, we discovered in space, no one can hear you scream. In 1992, we will discover on Earth, everyone can hear you scream.
Alien 3 is probably the most infamous production in film history, with multiple scripts and writers coming in to construct a number of different ideas. Fox knew their idea had to be perfect, which is why, in a moment of infinite wisdom, they mashed 6 different scripts together, one written by William Gibson, the father of the cyberpunk genre, and went, let's just cut these pages up and reassemble them, Frankenstein style. The result of this hackneyed process is the incredibly disappointing Alien 3, which marked a trend for the rest of the series. People screwing up Alien. It's amazing how no one can recapture the magic of Alien on film. Of course, as many people know, some of the best material that the Alien franchise has ever seen is outside the films. Yes, Alien and Aliens together are a fantastic set of sequels, but one of the best Alien pieces of media around is Alien Isolation, one of the most frightening video games ever made, because it returned to the fear generated by the original film. Video games can capture that sense of isolation quite well, but in film it's a little trickier. As of this writing, Alien Romulus is set to come out next week. And I am anxiously excited. I think I'm going to like it, but, you have to be a little cautious. You have to be a little wary. I've been burned before by Alien. I don't want to get my hopes all up right now. But what I can tell you is I'm still a big Alien fan, and part of that has to do with the comics. Between Aliens and Alien 3, several comics were released to occupy fans, including a crossover, well, actually a few crossovers, pitting the aliens against the predators. And this sparked the imagination. Can someone do it right in live action? I mean, at first, the Alien and Predator might be a weird combination, but when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. The Xenomorphs are considered the ultimate predator. The Yautja, which I will just call predators because I can't pronounce normal words, let alone that, are the ultimate hunters. It makes sense the two would be polar opposites, enemies in space. Add to the mix some space marines who have to survive this conflict, and you have a fascinating saga. And it seemed inevitable we would get a film based on this, especially following the success of Freddy vs. Jason. When Freddy vs. Jason came out, monster mashes were in, yet very few monster mashes ever materialized. Famously, they almost made Michael Myers versus Pinhead. People were teasing Candyman versus Leprechaun. They were like weird. They were ideas pitched in Hollywood, but for whatever reason, despite the interest in monster mashes and the beginnings of a shared universe of horror, only one crossover really materialized to take advantage of this newfound interest. The original Alien vs. Predator and its sequel are polarizing, to say the least. Well, actually, the first one's polarizing. Everyone agrees Requiem is a complete failure, but AVP, there's more debate about. But I think AVP's problems come from it in part coming out in a different nerd landscape. Like, for one, while the internet was getting big, it wasn't as big as it is today, and I don't think film executives realized how important the internet would be in marketing their film. Bad word of mouth can really doom a film before it even comes out, for example. Nor did executives seem to realize just how the internet could offer a viewpoint into the audience's wants and needs. Yeah, so at times it feels as though AVP is a film made for general audiences more than fans of either franchise, or the comics, or the games. Rather than focus on Space Marines, for example, as was the case in the comics and the games, we go to the Antarctic under a buried pyramid and focus on scientists. Kind of the same people who we'd see in stuff like the Alien movies, to an extent, of course, but not really Predator heroes. Because Predator heroes are usually fierce warriors, combatants. Aliens does have space marines, but most of the Alien films focus on people who are non-combatants, scientists, space truckers, prisoners without weaponry at all. So usually the people are more vulnerable when the alien comes. So rather than focus on what made the comic successful, they kind of harken back to the original Aliens cast with Predators mixed in, which doesn't always work. The aliens and the Predators also got tied in with conspiracy theories, because the idea of the film is that the Predators came and helped guide human evolution, human society, and help develop these giant pyramids, which kind of ties in with the whole, did aliens build the pyramids or whatever, conspiracy theories you see very popular all around the net. So it felt more geared toward general audiences who could just see people being people out of their depth, surviving. The human characters in AVP are what you'd expect in a slasher film more than a sci-fi saga. Aside from the main protagonist, none of the heroes offer much in terms of characterization, nor do any of them feel like a match for the Predators. Humanity is very much caught in the middle of a bigger fight, and again, ignoring our protagonist, who does become BFFs with the Predator, and gains respect of the Yautja tribe. The humans don't really factor into the plot. It really is, they're caught in the middle of this war. But that being said, I kind of love AVP. It's not really a great entry in the Alien franchise, nor is it a great Predator movie, but it's a fun WWE match, essentially. It is pitting two things you love together, and you have fun watching them brawl. I mean, look, it could have been better. I mean, look who directed it. Paul W.S. Anderson, fresh off his incredible sci-fi horror film, Event Horizon. However, it also could have been much, much worse, considering it was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, shortly before he became known for a series of increasingly mediocre and yet surprisingly watchable Resident Evil films. I'm kind of shocked he didn't just put Mila Jovovich in to shoot a bunch of Xenomorphs with pistols that never ran out of ammo. I'm surprised he didn't do that. I can see her jumping off the walls and doing somersaults in midair, shooting down at a bunch of Xenos, whatever. But what works about AVP? Well, it's a self-contained sci-fi slasher and a monster brawl fest. It delivers the goods on that. And it does this by mainly being a Predator film. I feel Predator has always leaned into the interconnectivity of these two sagas more than Alien has. Obviously, there's a Xenomorph skull in Predator 2, and there were plans to bring either Ripley or Newt into the finale of The Predator. But beyond that, though, I feel Predator doesn't try to reinvent the wheel as often as the Alien franchise does. Prometheus basically retconned both AVP films from continuity and went off to focus on these theories about life and existence. Alien is always focused on these otherworldly adventures in the distant future. There's sci-fi locales, there's evil corporations who want to use the Xenomorphs for profit. There's the idea that humanity is pushing up against this massive universe that has little interest in them other than as prey. Alien as a franchise is inherently Lovecraftian horror, with the Xenomorphs being this impossible, monstrous thing. They have acid for blood, they have second mouths in their bodies, their reproductive cycle is bizarre. I think one of the greatest moments in the original film is where they encounter the engineer, formerly known as the space jockey, this fossilized ancient alien who clearly has something burst out of his chest. He's been stuck there for millions of years, and there's these eggs birthed all around him. We don't know what happened, we don't know how he got there, and we don't know how long he's been there. And all of that not knowing makes it actually more terrifying. It implies that both the universe is far more vast than humanity realizes, and that there are things lurking in the darkness beyond the stars that have bested other races. And even though the aliens become more insect-like, more like a horde in Aliens, I love the idea that was scrapped from the original film that the Xenomorphs turn their victims into eggs. Which is just so much more grotesque and so much more nightmarish. It adds a dimension of utter horror and unknowability with the Xenomorphs. And while I do know some fans theorize this scene is potentially canon and that Xenos can reproduce both with a queen or through this grotesque practice, I think we need some allusion to this in future Alien films because it's just so deeply disturbing. And this is why I think Alien Covenant disappoints me so much. It compresses the aliens, making it impossible for that fossilized engineer to exist. Because the timeline's now much shorter. We just find out David made aliens 100 years before the first film. I don't know if you know this, you can't make a fossil in 100 years. It takes millions of years to fossilize.
Looks like it's been dead a long time. Fossilized.
So it kind of undercuts that cosmic horror that's so present in the original film. And if, the Xenomorphs were only made like 100 or 200 years before the first film, there wouldn't be enough time for any of this massive change. And that also said, just implying the Xenomorphs are something mankind created, that demystifies them even further. I mean, sure, it's an android, not humanity, but you get the idea. Something that's made by a thing we can comprehend, that's not as interesting. It's more frightening if we see something beyond the stars that evolved naturally under conditions we can't even possibly imagine. That's scary. Making something in a lab is knowable, and knowing what the Xenomorphs are makes them far less frightening. It makes mankind feel just a bit too much in control of something that should be utterly uncontrollable.
How do we kill it, Ash? There's gotta be a way of killing it. How? How do we do it?
You can't.
Now, I mentioned a little before, the AVP films, they're more Predator films than Alien films, and there's a reason why I said that. The Predator films, in contrast with Alien, are very humanist. The Predators seek out people to hunt because they're a worthy adversary. Already, that makes people look pretty good, because we are a worthy adversary for the Predator. That's something right there. The aliens don't seek out people, we just happen to intersect in their path, whereas the Predators seek humans out. In each film, the Predator comes to Earth, except for Predators, where it's a little different, to hunt, to fight. And yes, they fight the strongest among us, the most powerful, the most like 80s action stars, and Danny Glover. But the point is that humanity, with a little ingenuity, can beat a Predator. Each time. Yes, it's tough. Yes, it's almost impossible. And yes, the collective whole of the Predators are stronger than humanity. But we can win if we put our minds to it. In fact, sometimes our technology keeps us from knowing how to properly turn the tides against the Predators. It's a very humanist story about human triumph. Whereas Alien, it's not really about that. The Predator films combine sci-fi action with the slasher genre in a way that teases both humanity is outmatched, but also ends with, actually, if we think outside the box and rely on our wits, we can come out on top. The Xenomorphs, not so much. Those are stories where humanity is always outmatched against this unknowable force from beyond the stars. And even if we survive today, we may not survive tomorrow. Now, AVP takes this a little further. We find out that the Predators don't see humanity as the ultimate hunt. They see the Xenomorphs as the ultimate hunt. However, we also see that the Xenomorphs might overwhelm the Predators, using pure deadly force alone against them. The Horde outmatches the Hunters. That already shows that both humanity and the Predator are facing the same cosmic horror that the Xenomorphs provide, this unknowable vastness from beyond the stars. It's easy to sympathize with the Predators, therefore, because they're more human in so many ways, against the cold, unfeeling Xenos. Now that said, everything that happens in both AVP films is due to the Predators. They bring the Xenomorph eggs to Earth, and in turn, it's their technology that reawakens the Queen. And in Requiem, it is the Predator who gets chest bursted and gives birth to the Predalien. The Predators are the problem, and they're fixing their own problem, which is a very human thing to do, I feel. Also, with the original AVP, can I just point out that so far, aside from Aliens, this is the only film that features an impressive alien queen fight. Alien Resurrection doesn't really count, because the newborn is the real antagonist of that film. At least the real final boss of that film, I should say. Ultimately, AVP accomplishes a few things that I think modern audiences forget. For one, it makes humanity feel vulnerable, as is the case in many good Alien films. But it also makes humanity feel powerful, as is the case in the finale and all the Predator films. Human ingenuity is what saves the day. But the Predators and the aliens feel like authentic threats to all parties involved. At no point are the Predators too unstoppable, and at no point are the aliens an easy target. You need to blow the whole thing up and nuke it from orbit just to stop them. And of course, this is entirely unlike what we see in Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which I think is an awful film and just plain terrible. The main Predator is an unstoppable badass in that film, who carves through every single threat that comes his way, in scenes so poorly lit that you can't even see what's going on. So any interesting fight scenes or practical effects that are interesting, they're just impossible to see, and that sucks to watch because you can't really watch it. It's just bad. You're just looking at darkness the whole time. Look, these fights, what's even going on? You can't even see the practical effects that these artists spent like months creating and crafting. It's terrible. It's absolutely dreadful. Like, say what you will about AVP, the original movie. Like, those fights are well lit. You can see everything. Yes, they sometimes rely on CG or whatever, and yes, they're usually bloodless outside the uncut version, but at least you can see what's happening clearly. Also, all of the human characters in AVP Requiem, they're terrible. By comparison, AVP's, the originals cast, are like Shakespearean, like, masterworks, as opposed to AVP Requiem, which is just the stockiest of stock characters doing stocky things. And I want to address one thing. One common criticism of the first AVP is Anderson's sanitized view of the franchise. Between the Xenos and the Predators, you see a lot of these really great practical effects, but you also see intermixed with some CG, which sometimes looks good, and other times doesn't look good. There's also very little gore in the film. And there's this unrated cut, I know, which adds some violence back in, but otherwise it feels like it was cut a certain way to make families see the film. Which, you know what? Okay. AVP served as an introduction to both franchises, in much the same way that Freddy vs. Jason did. And this was many teens' introductions to both these franchises. So if teens can go see the movie in theaters, okay, I can live with that. It helped me watch these movies, certainly in theaters, when I was a kid, because I was too young to watch Alien, like an R-rated AVP in theaters, you kidding? But on the other hand, AVP Requiem amped up the violence to absurd levels, and you'd think that'd be good, because if the big complaint of the first film is it's not violent enough, then the opposite must be true, right? Well, no. Yes, AVP amped up the violence, but it also failed to properly amp up the emotional investment, and as a result, the violence means nothing. People think that violence is like a get-out-of-jail-free card with horror. Like, you have to have more violence, more gore, more blood, but without emotional backing, or at least a reason to care, that violence is meaningless to its audience. And the greatest example, that scene where the pregnant woman is force-fed chest bursters from the Predalien. Yeah, it is deeply unpleasant, and it's disturbing, but what do you feel when watching it? Consider in the first Alien film, when you see the first chestburster come out, right? You get to know these characters. They're just chatting around the breakfast table, just sitting there, conversing. You feel their humanity, you get comfortable with them. And when the scene happens, it's jarring because it's something that people you've grown to like, or at least respect, in a dangerous situation. The pregnant women just show up in that scene. They maybe have a couple shots beforehand, but like, they're barely in the movie. And when the Predalien kills them, it's just, it might as well be a blow-up doll. It might as well be a lamp that the alien kills, for all the emotional investment you feel. You project onto them. You see a pregnant mother. You see a woman being attacked by this alien. And that is scary. But there's no inherent fear in the story. It's just shown to shock you. And that's cheap in a way that I personally find very distasteful, because you have to build up to horror. You have to build up to disturbing scenes like that. You have to make the audience care. And if you fail to care, if you fail to invest in this instance, then the film loses you. When you see something cheap like that, it affects everything. It destroys all the trust in the film you have. And while AVP, the original, never went that far into the graphic territory, it also never cheapened the experience by showing you something that they wanted you to be shocked by, but failed. So by aiming lower, AVP actually goes higher. By staying in its lane and knowing what kind of film it was trying to be, and being that well, it avoids stuff that takes you out of it. You come to AVP to watch a WWE match. You don't really come in to be disturbed. But if you're going to be disturbed, you better make it good. I think the scenes where the pregnant mothers get chest bursted is one of the most underwhelming chest bursting scenes in any Alien film, because there's no emotional attachment. Every other Alien chest bursting scene in every other Alien film has more emotional build up to it. Even if it's not a character you necessarily like or even know that well, there's emotional context. Aliens, for example, is a harrowing scene where the young boy who's been, calcified to the wall has the chest burster come out. And this boy, it is his first time appearing, much like the pregnant women who the Predalien executes. But unlike in AVP Requiem, this boy has an emotional resonance with Ripley, who herself just lost her own child. You can see that projection in Ripley's reaction to this boy being killed, as well as the trauma of the previous film. And that trauma impacts the scene. It adds a grounding of emotionality to it that's been set up gradually over the course of the film. You don't have to know who the boy is, but what the boy represents to Ripley is important, as well as to the Space Marines who are seeing this for the first time, who've been doubting this whole time what actually is happening, and the severity of the events. But a pregnant mother being attacked, that could be a scene like straight out of Inside, the French horror film, but Inside does a lot of work to build up to its horror, and as a result, has an effective horror scene, because Inside is a movie that's all about one single act of violence stretched over the course of a whole film. This is a single act of grotesque violence tossed in for the sake of shocking you, and as a result comes across as cheap because it is in fact very cheap. In case you couldn't tell, I'm not a big fan of AVP Requiem. I think it's awful. I think it's the worst film in both series. And it was so bad it spelt the end of AVP as a franchise on film, which I find distasteful because there's a lot of potential in these crossovers. I love this concept, and I want to see more of this concept. So is there any hope for future AVP content? Yes and no. In fact, there's a complete Alien vs. Predator project right now that's sitting on a shelf in the Disney archives at this very moment. Alien vs. Predator Annihilation is an unreleased anime made by Shinji Aramaki. It was made back in 2015-2016. It's 10 episodes long, and it cost $4 million to produce, roughly. But no one knew it existed until 2023, when it was mentioned on the podcast, The Best TV Never Made. Annihilation would have taken place after Alien Resurrection and would have focused on a giant immigration ship. And some of the details include a predator named Bone, who, like a player in a Monster Hunter game, constructs weapons out of the bones and tusks of his adversaries. That sounds really cool, doesn't it? There's an alien-human hybrid, again, this is post-Alien Resurrection, who would have been able to control the Xenomorphs using her pheromones, which is kind of cool, I think. Like an alien whisperer, maybe. The antagonist would have been this evil economist who, again, harkens back to the Alien franchise, where the main villains are always capitalists trying to exploit the Xenomorphs. You have all the ingredients for something fun here. Now, the anime was fully complete and set to come out on Alien Day in 2016. This is completed, by the way. I think it was even dubbed. There were tie-in novels and tie-in works, games were being planned, everything. But there were some conflicting remarks about the quality of Annihilation. I haven't really seen a definitive statement on how good it is. I mean, for all I know, it could be terrible. I have no idea. There are many ideas on paper that sound incredible, but when you watch them, they're not that great. The big reoccurring criticism I heard, though, is that Annihilation felt like it came out of the 90s rather than the 2010s. Now, I personally see this as a selling point, because the 2010s for the Alien and Predator franchise was a dark era that I don't want to go back to. But Fox felt that AVP Annihilation might cannibalize public interest in two Alien and Predator movies they had coming out. The Predator, the Shane Black film, and Alien Covenant. And I think that both are some of the worst entries in both sagas. But so knowing that we lost an anime crossover film in favor of these two not that great films, I find that kind of disappointing. But then Disney purchased 20th Century Fox. They had the anime now, a fully complete piece of media, and they could release it, but they haven't. But unlike with Fox, who shelved it because, they didn't want it to interfere with Covenant or whatever, there might be some reasoning behind Disney's decision, though I do want this out. Understand, I want this anime to come out like today. If we bully Disney enough, maybe it can happen. But I think the thing is that Disney, they wanted to focus on reestablishing both the Predator and the Alien franchise's general audiences. The 2010s were devastating for both because they just kind of wore the goodwill that the audiences had with these both. And, Alien was a joke, Predator was a joke. Disney concluded that in order to build the audience trust back, they had to release really good Predator and Alien movies. I think this was a good idea to reestablish that because it's been working so far. Yes, I want to see this anime. I do not like the idea of any unreleased media just sitting on a shelf somewhere. Whatever Warner Brothers is doing half the time with Batgirl movies would drive me nuts. But we see Disney had some logic here. Reestablish these franchises. Make them good again. And yeah, they've been working. And yeah, listen, Prey is now regarded as one of the best Predator films of all time for a great reason. And it's inspired excitement for more Predator films. We have 2 new Predator films in development right now. Because we've seen the Predators in modern time. We've seen them in the future with the comics, but we haven't really seen them enough in the past. Historical fiction involving the Predators fighting the greatest warriors in history. That's some cool stuff. I still think we need to see Predators fight some samurai. Like Shogun, that was fantastic. Get the Shogun guys over to Predator. Have a samurai and a Predator fight. I would love that. And Alien Romulus, please be good, and the upcoming FX Alien sci-fi show new perspectives on familiar concepts, with new talent coming in. See, what Disney did is ironically the same thing they did with the Star Wars franchise. At least at first. Give numerous directors a chance to tell their stories in these sandboxes. But while this proved messy for Star Wars, it's done wonders for Alien and Predator separately. We have more interest in these franchises than ever before in years. Alien and Predator feel new. And potentially, there is room for a new AVP film. Following the release of Prey, in an interview with Variety, producer John Davis, who's been a longtime producer for both franchises, teased the possibility of another Predator vs. Alien film. This time, possibly taking place at another point in history, like Prey, which means that the producers of these sagas are thinking about AVP, though this time in the style of Prey. It's easy to map out the Predator franchise's future, given Prey's success, but Alien Romulus's success might offer a perspective on where both franchises might intersect in the future. And personally, I think it would be a colossal waste not to do more AVP films. Both franchises can stand on their own, but if they cross-pollinate, it adds a new dimension to both narratives. But at the same time, you can also explore both individually. There's a lot of potential now. I haven't felt as excited for Predator films since 2010's Predators, and even then I felt that film felt constrained to give audiences what they expected from the previous Predator films. This feels loosened up in a way that's exciting and different. Fede Alvarez's vision for Alien might prove similarly exciting for the Alien franchise, open the door up to new Xeno stories, but and as long as they just avoid whatever Prometheus and Covenant were doing, make the aliens Lovecraftian horrors again, not familiar creations by something made by man. It's too easy for the Alien films just become another bug hunt story, which sometimes makes them less frightening. It brings them down a level, make them Lovecraftian, make them unusual, make them exciting. If we do return to this world of AVP, I think it'd be wise to emphasize just how horrifying the aliens are, and just how outgunned the Predators feel in the face of their threat. But most of all, how even the most powerful, intimidating people in the world can't stop them. Not without being clever and smart. The aliens should be just as clever as the humans are fighting the Predators. Incorporate strategy, make them interesting, make them a smart, dangerous threat, so they're not just hordes of bugs. But this also invites another question. If we're talking about Alien and Predator, we need to talk about the loose assembly of shared universes that the Alien franchises have developed around them, specifically with the Blade Runner and Terminator franchises.
While these are fun Easter eggs to spot, a fairly definitive answer may actually be found within the features on the home video release of Prometheus, which show internal memos from the Weyland Corporation, dictated but not read by Peter Weyland himself. They reveal that at one time, Weyland and Tyrell were acquaintances, engaged in somewhat friendly competition. One particular memo reads, "A mentor and long-departed competitor once told me that it was time to put away childish things and abandon my, quote, toys. He encouraged me to come work for him, and together we would take over the world and become the new gods. That's how he ran his corporation, like a god on top of a pyramid overlooking a city of angels. Of course, he chose to replicate the power of creation in an unoriginal way by simply copying God. And look how that turned out for the poor bastard."
Neither sci-fi saga is owned by Disney, so future crossovers are kind of impossible. Terminator, however, did have a massive crossover with AVP in the comics, and given how at one point The Predator was going to have time-traveling Newts and Ripleys fight the Predators, it seems like time travel is at least a theme that could have intersected with the greater AVP chronology, which would have been a complete mess, but it could have happened. Now, what's interesting about both Blade Runner and Terminator is that they're both stories that focus on androids, though obviously the milky robots of the Alien franchise are vastly different than Blade Runner's replicants or the T-800s from Terminator. However, in all three, there is one core theme: self-awareness, intentionality. And all three take this concept of intentionality of the robot's actions in different directions. Blade Runner argues that the replicants are more human than humanity believes, capable of forging bonds and ideas independent of their initial core initiatives. They may have been built for a function, but have diverged from that function. On the other hand, the Terminators in Skynet are a singular system driven by logic. They are individual Terminators who diverge from their functionality, but they are exceptions, and often the result of either modifications issued by humanity or machines abandoned, who have outlived their mission and continue to go on without direction. But aliens, robots, they're a little different. They're somewhere in between those 2 points. Some, like Ash, are cold and ruthless, able to imitate humanity, but also able to occupy a role.
That could never happen now with our behavioral inhibitors. It is impossible for me to harm or by mission of action allow to be harmed a human being. You sure you don't want some?
And some robots, like Prometheus's David, push their boundaries to the limit, forging their own identity to become God, a creation becoming a creator. Lance Henriksen stated when playing Bishop, the way he interpreted Bishop, the reason he could endure being dehumanized by his peers is because he knew that he had the capacity to outlive all of them. In the future, while they were rotting, Bishop would still be, and that confidence had him behave coldly. A very human motivation. And audiences have always tried finding connections between the Weyland-Yutanis and all the Blade Runner corporations, the Tyrell Corporation, but consider this. Audiences have tried to draw connections, but they don't ever feel interconnected the same way Alien and Predator do. No one talks about Alien and Blade Runner the way we talk about Alien and Predator. Why is that? And again, they've also been AVP crossovers with superheroes. There's one going on right now that Disney owns the AVP franchises. They've been crossing over the Xenos with the Marvel superheroes. Batman's fought the Predator. Like, why do we not talk about these other crossovers the way we talk about AVP? Well, there's a few reasons for that. Let's ignore the fact that the connections between Blade Runner and Alien are tenuous at best. These worlds don't mash together the same way, like the way the Predators and Aliens do. Now, both franchises, the Aliens and Predators, focus on one core concept: humanity interacting with an alien species that outdoes them. Crossovers work best when there's commonalities, room to intersect. The Aliens take place in the far future. Those films are far, far away. The Predator films tend to take place in the present or the past. That means there's a lot of overlap, and until Alien Covenant came along, there was a lot of potential history that was unaccounted for in the films. Positions in the timeline where the Predators and the Aliens could interact, both in the far future and the far past. With both sagas evolving in new and exciting ways, there's now more room than ever for these crossovers. In this new era of Alien and Predator, we're seeing them reinterpreted yet again. But the commonality still remains. The appeal to see these two crossover remains. And as long as the core appeal of the franchises remain, there is the same opportunity for cross-pollination.